Hello and a very warm welcome to Money Control. We are just about 2 weeks away from the interim budget, and there's one thing about Indian CEOs. No matter when you ask them, what you ask them, usually the answers are always positive. Which is why, 2 weeks before the budget, we decided to reach out to over 50 CEOs of India. These are people who are running India's biggest companies, creating jobs, and so on. We went ahead and asked them of their assessment of the Indian economy, and we did this on the condition that their names will remain anonymous. The intention was to get an accurate gauge of what India Inc. thinks and feels about the Indian economy. We wanted to move beyond the macro numbers. We wanted to get a sense from the horse's mouth on whether they will go ahead with their investment plans, on what their hiring plans are, and most importantly, how bullish or are they bullish on India? Our survey has thrown up some very, very interesting findings, and I'm just very happy to report that this is one of the most exhaustive surveys of India Inc. done by any news organization this close to the budget. To discuss the findings with me, I have with me Mr. Mohandas Pai, Chairperson of Manipal Global Education, and Mr. K Joshi, Chief Economist from CRISIL. Mr. Pai and Mr. Joshi, thank you so much for joining us. Very quickly, I'm going to take you all through and our viewers of the key findings that have come up with the survey. One, 98% of the respondents surveyed have said that they are either cautiously optimistic or very optimistic about the Indian economy. They have said that they do plan to go ahead with their investment plans in the next 6 months. They say that they're going to ramp up their hiring in the next 6 months. All extremely heartening indicators coming in, and these are CEOs from across sectors, whether it's startups, whether it is the banking industry, whether it is the oil and gas space, FMCG, you name it, and we've covered it. So very quickly, Mr. Pai, your first reaction on the CEO survey findings. Is this reflective of your conversations that you have with people running companies?
Well, more than being reflective, this is what data is saying. Let me give you some data. Last year, 2023 March, corporates paid 10 lakh 4,000 crores as gross corporate tax. If you take an effective tax rate of, let's say, 25%, that is pre-tax income of 40 lakh crores. Pre-tax income of 40 lakh crores on 272 lakh crores of GDP is 15%. 15% of GDP is pre-tax profit of the corporate sector. And if you look at this year, it will possibly go up to 12 lakh crores because, the oil sector has done well. The banking sector is doing much better. Other sectors have done well. So there'll be an increase in profits. So they've got enough money and enough cash. And today, the corporate sector last year, 23, raised bonds, 9 lakh 80,000 crores of bonds. They're not borrowing from bank, but they're raising bonds. The second point I want to give is job creation. Last year, about 1.5 to 1.6 crore new people with Aadhaar joined EPFO and paid contribution. This is much more real than the silly CMI data based upon some silly survey. And they paid contribution, they paid money, so the real jobs, 53% are people below the age of 25, 26% are women. So we're seeing large-scale job creation. We are seeing large-scale profits in the corporate sector. We're seeing debt-equity ratio go down. And they're all expanding. If you look at steel, if you look at cement, if you look at roads, if you look at ports, if you look at airports, if you look at airlines, and you look at all sectors, they're all increasing the capital expenditure. And it's there for everybody to see. The last point is, last year, our gross capital formation was 31% of GDP. That's more than $1 trillion. Indians are investing $1 trillion a year with government investing $250 billion. Right? That is huge. There are only three countries in the world which invest more than $1 trillion in capex. That is China, the United States, and India. So I think we are in good shape. And this survey bears out what is happening in industry. And this is what we have been saying. And I'm very happy to see that it's all coming out in the right kind of surveys by Moneycontrol.
Right. Thank you for that, Mr. Pai. Mr. Joshi, very quickly want to get your thoughts in. Like Mr. Pai quoted a whole host of data indicators that show that clearly India Inc. is bullish on India. What do you think is driving this optimism?
Well, I think first is that we've recorded growth which is much higher than expected. The first quarter GDP came in higher than expected. Then the second quarter was also higher than expected. And the final fiscal year numbers beat the expectations of all the analysts at 7.3%. So one is the growth momentum is strong. Second, I
Mhm.
think the investment, the growth is investment led, so that makes you positive on on the near term as well as over the medium term, because when you invest, you raise the potential of the economy. Then finally, I think the third factor is that uh, the bank balance sheets, the corporate balance sheets, they are in extremely good condition. I mean, the corporates have very low leverage, particularly the mid and the large size corporates. So they are primed up for undertaking investments. And I think low leverage also has positive impact on the rating. So I think overall, the health of the corporate sector is pretty good. And on top of that, the banking sector also, I think, is has been in a phase of declining non-performing assets. So they going ahead, they can lubricate the economy much better. And then I think the third reason is the creation of physical infrastructure and the success of a digital infrastructure. I think they have been, particularly the latter one, has been phenomenal. So all these things infuse confidence, and I think the and make the players bullish. And I think at the ground level also, as Mr. Pai was pointing out, the corporate profits have been very healthy. It has been helped by lowering of input costs. I think definitely. I think that increases the value addition from the firms. So clearly, I think the many factors are pointing towards a positive growth outlook for India, and this is happening in an environment where globally, I think the risks are very elevated.
Right. Let me also welcome Mr. Rohinton Sidhwa, who's joining us. Rohinton, thank you so much for joining in. Very quickly, we were just going through the key survey findings and a lot of optimism that's coming through. Is that something that you see amongst your clients as well? Most importantly, I'd like to quote a figure here: 69.8% of the respondents said that they are planning to invest in the next 6 months.
Sure. So I would say investment is a decision that really has a long gestation period. And if you see the investment that's started to come in, we had this in 2019, we had a special amendment made in our income tax rates, bringing about a 15% rate for manufacturing, new manufacturing that takes place in India. Now, that actually provided quite a bit of impetus. So, if you see the run up of FDI that has happened from 19 onwards to 21, we've seen a significant uptick in the post COVID environment. But what I would say is that the investment that's really come up until now is only the tip of the iceberg. Now, unfortunately, this tax holiday expires in March of 2024,
Right.
and the government may decide to extend it. But if you go to see the real gestation period of some of the large projects, typically takes anywhere between 2 to 3 years. You're talking about car manufacturing, say in EVs, or you're looking at chip manufacturing. All that takes about 2 to 3 years kind of a gestation period for it to actually fructify. Now,
Sure.
I believe that there is going to be that upsurge which is still going to come in.
Mhm.
There's another very important phenomenon that's playing out in India, and I was just reading that a large portion of the world's democracies are going to be heading for elections in
Yes.
2024. In
Yes.
fact, India suffers, sorry, the other country suffers from the fact that they don't know who the next incumbent is going to be. Whereas in India, a lot of public feeling is that the prime minister is going to come in and have an extended innings again.
Sure.
And
The
therefore, there's a lot of stability in policy that seems to be coming around. That also, to some extent, adds to stability for investment climate and optimism.
Okay, Mr. Pai, I'd like you to comment on this. Do you agree with Rohinton on this, that there is a sense of policy certainty? This is a big election year. We have general elections coming up very soon. We have a vote and account in 2 weeks. So there is this sense of stability, perhaps, that's driving this sense of optimism, and the fact that India continues to be the brightest spot at a time when a lot of developed economies are struggling.
Yes, I think political stability is important to know. But I think the bigger issue is very different. The economy is doing well. Productivity is going up. Supply chain costs are coming down. Investments are going up. It is all there in the data, right? And India Inc. has become much more efficient after COVID. There's a massive cost reduction after COVID. And India Inc. has become that much more, productive. And now we need to focus on the export market to export. And you see, I'll give some 2, 3 pieces of data more. We have a trade in services of $350 billion. We have a surplus on service exports of $195 billion because IT brings in $140 billion and remittances $100 billion. We have a trade deficit in goods of $270 billion. In 3 years' time, the surplus on services and the deficit on trade in goods could match. If that happens, what happens to the currency? There could be currency stability instead of seeing a depreciating currency, and that will really, really help. So if you add all these things, the internal workings of the economy are very, very good. Efficiency, productivity, investment, consumption. People are saying rural consumption is down. But you must remember, we have many startups in rural areas in this area. They say business is improving because there's a substitution of many products by smaller local companies. They're selling toothpaste, soap, all kind of stuff. Hindustan Lever and Emami, they're all outpriced. So consumption there too is going up. People point to the 4.4% increase in private consumption. I don't think that captures the whole set of consumption happening because GST has gone up by 12% for this year compared to the previous year. If consumption has gone up by 4.4%, and when you say consumption and the GST has gone up by 12%, obviously somebody is consuming more, and the top 20% cannot be increasing consumption by 20%. You understand? So if you look at all this data, this optimism, political stability, and the demand that people are seeing is pretty high. And I think the demand and political stability is what is driving investment in a very large way.
Okay, let's bring in Dr. Joshi here. Dr. Joshi, what do the macro numbers tell us? Because we've seen that private investment has lagged behind these last few years. We've seen government really taking the lead in capex. So I want to get a sense from you on on by when do we see private sector investment really growing and driving, or private sector in firing on all engines when it comes to driving investments and growth?
Well, you're right. I think the delta for investments has largely come from government, and particularly in the right areas, which is infrastructure. Private investment is yet to become broad-based in that sense. I think so. Let me give you some points on private investment. One is that since government is investing in infrastructure, there is a direct spillover to the private sector. So steel, cement, these companies are doing extremely well. I think because they're directly linked to to the government spend in infra. Then I think you have the segments which are getting impacted by the industrial policy, which is the PLI scheme. Here, I think we have seen investments, notable investments in electronics and also in pharma, etc. So now, within this industrial policy, there are other schemes as well. So the pharma and electronics are not very capital intensive. The capital intensive ones are going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years, which is your auto sector, your specialty steel, or for that matter, the ACC batteries. I think all these will happen. And then finally, I think we also seeing very high capacity utilization in manufacturing. It's not in all the segments the high capacity utilization has translated into physical investments, and I think that phase is also going to take place now. So I would say that I think we are primed up for a lift in private investment cycle. On top of that, I think apart from what I just said, there's also the healthy balance sheets of the corporate sector that help. There is global interest in India, so that also will bring in some investments as the supply chains shift over a period of time. So I would say the conditions are pretty ripe for the private investments to lift. Now the issue is, I think, while you were mentioning all these results of the survey, you pointed out that there is one, I think, concern from the private sector that government should let them do their business. I mean, so that was the ask. So if you, I think, what I would interpret it, I think that gets reduced. There is more tax certainty. I think if these things happen, I think we would have a animal spirits driven private capex revival, which essentially would mean that government will be very, will be comfortable to pull back from the investments, because they also have to focus on fiscal consolidation. I think most of the deficit right now increases because government is spending on infrastructure. It's the right way to do it, but I think government also recognizes that they can't keep doing the heavy lifting in this area. The private sector has to come in, and I think the condition is ripe for that to happen.
Okay. One very interesting finding is that 15.1% of the respondents said that they were highly concerned about global economic uncertainty. About 35.8% said they were monitoring the situation closely, and 35.8% said they were somewhat concerned. So I want to understand, how much of what happens around the globe can impact this business sentiment. Rohinton, would you like to come in on this?
Sure. So India tends to be a very domestically led consumerist type of economy, though exports is where we are placing our big gambles on. Now, clearly, with a couple of wars in progress around the world and shipping being attacked in certain critical areas, in the oceans, that is not conducive to growing your exports and to spur demand and things like that. So there is that feeling that it may be great innings for India within India, but getting onto the global stage is a different kettle of fish altogether. In the sense that while you're talking about here, we are talking about relocating supply chains from other places into our country, and there perhaps that's what's really taking time. I would say that also another important factor that India needs to think about is its own investment into science and technology and research for its own manufacturing. It's great to be the manufacturing hub for the rest of the world, but there's limited utility in that, as we can see for China. The day everything changes for you, your country can be left high and dry. So it's very important that we develop our own domestic manufacturing base with our own domestic IPRs in order to be able to stand out as a strong competitor in the trade market around the world.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'd like for Mr. Pai to come in on this. We're barely 2 weeks away from the budget, Mr. Pai, and we did ask our respondents to name one big reform that they'd like to see the government do. And the responses have varied from regulatory stability to reducing bureaucratic red tape to tax and incentives for investments and startups. I want to get your sense in on what can the budget do to ride this positive sentiment to incentivize businesses to come forward and invest and go ahead with their hiring plans.
The biggest challenge for investment and for industry is the fear psychosis that has been created in this country. The ED, CBI, tax authorities, everybody is on an overdrive. Every day they're going on a tax rate saying we got this money, that money, but where is the resolution? ED is going and catching people saying, we found so much, we found this. GST is sending, notices to everybody. Where is stability? People are very scared of these people because there's no control of them. What we want is the government to announce that if the income tax, ED, CBI, or GST raid or issue a notice to anybody on economic matters, the matter charge sheet has to be filed within 90 days or 6 months, hearing has to be done, and then within 2 years, the judicial process has to be done. It goes on for years and years. 50,000 high net worth individuals have left this country in the last 10 years. And
Yeah.
if each of them spend 4 to 5 crores, 2 lakh crores plus purchasing power has gone away and more people are
Hmm.
going. Why? They're
Hmm.
scared that these things don't end. There is no end because the government has given the regulatory agency a free rein. They're not interfering
Hmm.
political to stop them. But where is the oversight? There is no oversight. Just today I read LIC got a tax refund of 25,000 crores because some income tax officers some time back wrote back interim bonus for 7 years and demanded tax, and it has been overturned in appeal. So why don't the income tax officer should be docked for creating a false claim? So where is this protection? To me, that is the big issue. Second big
Hmm.
issue is the justice system, Shweta, is broken. You have a tax dispute, IBC never gets settled. Tax
Hmm.
dispute with the courts go on for 10, 15 years. We need justice within 3 years. If we're
Yeah.
able to make sure the regulatory authorities, when they take up cases, settle within 2 or 3 years, go to court, and the courts give a decision economic matter within 2 or 3 years, that will be the biggest boost to investment, biggest boost to improving the morale of people in this country. We must remove this fear psychosis in this budget.
Very interesting and very valid, both these points, Mr. Pai, because that's something that one is picking up across conversations. It's this whole tax terrorism has gone on to another level, I think, and it's more from the regulatory aspect,
Let
and
me
it's
give you one
doing.
more data. Let me give one more data.
Mhm.
Tax disputes were 4,30,000 odd crores in 2014 when Finance Minister Jaitley promised an end to tax terrorism. Last year in the
Mhm.
budget, they say it's gone up to 12,25,000. This government has not done much to remove tax terrorism or to
Yeah,
reduce tax dispute. It's gone up 3x. What is the point? I think we need a
absolutely.
better tax system because they must finish the tax claim within 2 or 3 years, not go in appeal after appeal after appeal. And those
Mm.
people whose the tax decisions are overturned in appeal, they must be docked. They must be punished for wasting the time of the taxpayer and the government.
Absolutely. Mr. Joshi, what are the key things that you'll be watching out in this interim budget as a macroeconomist?
Well, I think first is fiscal consolidation. I think for three reasons. Number one is that in the peer group of similarly rated countries, India has a very high level of debt, above 80% of GDP. So I think it needs to be brought down, and that's been the commitment of the government also, that they'll be on a glide path to 4.5% of GDP for fiscal deficit. Second, I think we've entered the JP Morgan index now, so you'll be subject to more fiscal scrutiny. And then finally, I think fiscal consolidation will also help broadly, I think, in controlling inflation and bringing inflation down to 4% on a durable basis, which the RBI has been targeting. So I think that fiscal consolidation is one. Second, I think, is that government has done very heavy lifting on infra. I would
Mhm.
say that I think instead of sharply bringing it down, I think that can also be glided down slowly. I think so that the private, while the private sector lifts, the government pulls back a little bit on investments. So I think these and then finally, I think the third thing is, because as I pointed out earlier, the preconditions for the lift in private investment, be it the balance sheets, be it capacity utilization, be it the industrial incentives from the government, all of them support a revival of private investment. As Mr. Pai was pointing out, I think if we can make the tax regime more stable, if we can reduce the bureaucratic red tape, I think you're going to we'll see a very sharp and a sustainable uptick in private investment cycle.
Hmm. Rohinton, I want you to come in on this. What are the three big things, according to you, right now that's weighing on the minds of the corporates, and what can this vote on account do to address those pain points, so to speak, just so that this momentum, that the sentiment that we are seeing really gets translated into more, positive action and traction on ground.
So I think one area that the government's been very successful at has been for individual taxpayers, where they process the return quickly, they issue the refund quickly. That's not true for corporates. In the case of
Mhm.
corporates, there are a number of situations where refunds have been pending and they remain pending for a significant period of time. So I would expect the same sort of vigor which has been applied to individual taxpayers now also be extended to corporate taxpayers. The second
Sure.
area that I feel is where the government is lagging seriously is being the resolution at the first level of appeal in the tax department, which is called the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first layer of appeal that if your assessing officer makes an adjustment, you are entitled to go and appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. And typically, these appeals can only be made after a token amount of approximately 20% of the amount demanded is deposited with the assessing officer. Now, for the last 3 or 4 years, these appeals have been completely stuck. First, there was the issue about making it touchless, faceless.
Yeah.
And the second was simply there were just not enough people to administer the provisions. If you remember in last year's budget, the government took a specific approval to create a new post called the Joint Commissioner of Appeals. And even now, there is a significant amount of cases pending at Commissioner Appeals. I would hope that significant, efforts are made to dislodge these cases and make
Mhm.
sure that they get freed up, and which will also result in perhaps more companies getting back some of their refunds that they
Mhm.
have deposited with the tax department.
Mhm. So, one clear thing that's emerging from this conversation is, of course, the government stays true to the path of fiscal consolidation, but the tax department, the revenue department, really needs to get moving when it comes to speedier resolution, because I think that's emerged as one of the key pain points. And I think that's what the respondents have also referred to when they say that regulatory stability is very important and faster resolution of cases is very important. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast to get more to give your perspective on the money control CEO survey. It's Of course we'll be tracking all the news developments in the run up to the budget, and we'll be bringing you live analysis on the budget day. But thanks so much for joining in, and do catch all the action on the exclusive Money Control CEO survey on moneycontrol.com, on our homepage, and on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching.